Hey guys, welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom channel. For those of you who are returning, for those of you who are new here for the first time, welcome. I'm Dante Ferrigno. I have been doing a carnivore diet known as the lion diet now for close to 4 years. And that means all I have eaten over the past 4 years is ruminant meat, water, and salt, with the exception of a few experiments trying to see what other foods I could bring back in. But so far, pretty much straight lion diet has been the requirement for me ever since I found out that that was the key to unlocking all my health problems. And, for some people, a regular carnivore diet works, but this video isn't really directly related to the carnivore diet, but it is related to how I have been basically on this journey now for a little over 3 years, promoting good health through carnivore eating. Because in all of my life, and I'm 52 now, I never found anything that worked like the carnivore diet at relieving me of health issues, losing weight, getting rid of brain fog, getting my mental health back, even getting my spiritual life under control has been affected by the steps that I have taken to eliminate processed food and seed oils and sugar and lectins and all the things that are in our food these days from my diet. And I just want other people to know that this works, because we've been told for so many years, avoid red meat. Make sure you avoid all of these things that have salt and whatever else that I'm talking about when it comes to meat has been demonized pretty much since the 1960s, but really bad since the 1980s when they started implementing the guidelines of the infamous food pyramid, which is completely flipped on its head for people to be healthy. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of why that is today, but if you've been paying attention, you understand how things get screwed up, especially when the government gets involved. So that's actually been one of the things that I've been interested in ever since RFK Jr. got on to Trump's ticket, and he is pushing the Make America Healthy Again notion, which he's done with the support of Callie and Casey Means, two industry whistleblowers. One's a medical professional and another one who's worked in big food for many years. And they are sounding the alarm about how the food we are eating is poisoning us, about how the medical system is designed to keep us in a cycle of dependence, and how the government is working with both of them to increase profits for everybody. It's a pretty vicious circle we're tied in right now. So I thought I would take a look at the opposing viewpoint of what's going on with Trump here and RFK and his Make America Healthy agenda again. A Make America Healthy Again agenda is going to be. So I wanted to take a look at this video called Health Officials Concerned About RFK Jr.'s Influence on Trump Administration. Personally, I bet they are concerned, because a lot of them are probably going to be out of a job very soon. At least that's my hope, because, well, we'll get into it. Let's go ahead and bring this video up so we can take a look at it and see what we think.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's used his prominent platform to spread misleading and false claims about vaccine safety, is expected to play a big public health role in the next Trump administration. When asked about vaccines in a podcast interview last July, Kennedy said this.
Can you name any vaccines that you think are good?
I think some of the live virus vaccines are probably averting more problems than they're causing. There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective.
But yesterday, the former Democrat who ran for president as an independent before endorsing Donald Trump said this in an interview with NBC.
If vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. People ought to have a choice, and that choice ought to be informed by the best information. So I'm going to make sure the scientific safety studies and efficacies are out there, and people can make individual assessments about whether that product is going to be good for them.
We're joined now by Dr.
I don't see anything contradictory about the two things he said there. He's acknowledging that most vaccines don't accomplish what they mean to accomplish. And then also he's acknowledging that he doesn't want to take away something that somebody wants. There are a lot of people out there who want to have certain vaccines. I personally don't think that all vaccines are evil, but I'm not some vaccine expert. I don't go researching into all this. I just know that I decided a long time ago that I was done with the flu shot, and I started getting the flu a lot less. So I thought that was interesting. Anecdotal evidence, sure, it's on my part, but I'm not the only one who had that experience. I wind up hearing about that many, many times from people in my close community. And since then, since I've been online as prevalent as I have been, I hear more stories from people who experience the same exact thing. And then as soon as they go in to find out what they've got sick with, they find out they got the flu. But it's the version of the flu they didn't get vaccinated for, which kind of defeats the point of getting a vaccine if they're not going to get the right one. And it seems like that was a repeating issue. So I don't see anything wrong with what he said about vaccinations being questionable, and especially nothing wrong with knowing what they are designed to do, how they work, what their efficacy is. Do they actually work? What percentage of the time do they not work? And what percentage of that time does it cause major complications? People don't know these things. They just trust that it's all good because so many people trust their doctors. You should be able to trust a doctor. But unfortunately, the way the system has been designed, our system has been built around the medicine producing community. The companies that produce all the pharmaceuticals basically have complete control over the medical industry right now. And their focus is clearly on maximizing profits by reusing the same drugs over and over with slight changes just to keep the prices high, coming up with drugs that don't actually even fix the things that they're supposed to fix. And then when they do try to make a drug that actually helps somebody, like when Gilead Sciences came out with that cure pill for hepatitis C, the investors said, we quickly want to put that kind of stuff to sleep. We don't want people getting healthy. We don't want people getting cured. We want people on maintenance. We want to make sure the money keeps coming in. And when that's the foundation for what your medical system operates on, then you've got to rethink things from the ground up and not just follow the jargon and the ideas that somebody like this says, who's got the logos on the wall back there that indicate that he's somebody of importance because of some foundation or some .org, and that he's some medical professional that said or did something. We can look at the healthcare system and see that it is completely jacked up by the way that it's being run in this cronyism cycle between big food, big pharma, and big government, and it has nothing to do with actually getting people healthy. It's all about the appearances of helping people get healthy, but ultimately it's about lining the pockets of the people who are involved in the system, whether they're getting kickbacks from the companies that are wanting to have their products approved, or if they're getting jobs when they leave government to go work for these major corporations and make even more money because of the knowledge they had as a public servant that was using that information to their advantage then and using that information to their advantage now. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
Richard Besser, former acting director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and president and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And full disclosure, that foundation is a funder of the PBS NewsHour. Dr. Besser, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Amna. It's good to be here.
I want to make clear that you're here to talk about the science and the facts behind all of this. So let's just start with Mr. Kennedy's vaccine skepticism, which is well documented in interviews. He's questioned their safety, he's linked vaccines to autism and to cancer. Do any of those claims have merit?
You know, I'm also a pediatrician and practiced pediatrics for more than 30 years. And I can say that there's nothing I did as a pediatrician that had more positive impact on the health of the children I was caring for than making sure that they were vaccinated fully and on time.
Notice he didn't answer the question on if there was any harm caused from those things. He went simply to the fact that it was better in the long run instead of acknowledging that there are issues. This is where the vaccination discussion gets so muddled up, is because we know that, from studying history, vaccines were important in dealing with smallpox and things like that. But the way they're doing vaccines these days is they're making them at breakneck speeds, and there's so much arrogance on the level of the people who are making these things about thinking they know something about the way the human body works or the way the chemistry in the body works, that they are still just assuming based on a few factors that this might work or that might work. And then they're not afraid to throw in 1,000 side effects that are going to be a problem with this when they're done, just as long as it checks off a few boxes that are going to make sure they're selling a lot of these products.
Old enough that I've seen many of the infections that we vaccinate against appear in children and the devastating consequences. We are fortunate that we have the safest vaccine system in the world. Before a vaccine is given to a child or an adult, it goes through extensive testing. To raise these concerns and to say, well, it's parental choice, gives me great concern, because no vaccine is 100% protective. We can.
Extensive testing? How about the speed that we got the testing done on all the vaccines that were done for 2020, 2021? That wasn't very extensive. And they talked about how the type of vaccine they were working on, the mRNA, was going to be the type of thing that scientists at the time were saying, we're not going to be able to crack this anytime soon. This is way above our pay grade. We haven't made the inroads to do this. And then all of a sudden, we're running at breakneck speeds to come up with a solution for something that would take at least 10 years based on previous estimates. And now, because we have an emergency, we can make this work in 1 year. You know, regardless of who you want to put the blame on for that, there's no doubt that that vaccine was not to the quality that it could have been had it gone through proper testing. And not to mention, it was an untested product when it was first being pushed onto people. I know from my experience as an administrator at a retirement home that healthcare officials were telling me that I should recommend these vaccines to my patients or my residents there, even though I personally didn't believe in it. I didn't have any evidence that it was actually going to be good for them. I couldn't tell whether or not it was going to make them better or worse. And the small indicators I had were that people who would take it might actually get the illness and come down sicker quicker. My experience with that also led me to see several people die a lot quicker than we anticipated. Now, not that people don't die all the time, but when you're running a retirement home, you kind of see a normal flow of things. But when all of a sudden everybody who got the vaccine passes away in a very short period of time, or they have significant mood changes and behavioral changes that didn't occur prior to the vaccine, then you know there's something going on there. And if I'm just in a small little, it was a 24-bed retirement home, and I'm able to see more than 10% of our people who got the vaccine having a result from it that was negative, then it should be clear that we are rushing to make these things patented so that they can get the money out there, they can get the money into their pockets, which is exactly what we just witnessed happen. So how you can listen to somebody like this guy here that's going to say these things when we've seen exactly the opposite going on, it bewilders me how they can say it, except that they have a different agenda. That's the only explanation I can come up with, is their agenda is being hidden by this presentation that they're there for your health, that they're there watching out for you. And it really seems like there's just a whole lot of people watching out for themselves who are supposed to be gatekeepers.
On the fact that for a child to go to school, they need to be fully vaccinated. That protects them against infection, but it also makes sure that, if a child sitting next to them has an immune problem, or for some reason their vaccine didn't give them protection, they're less likely to get sick. That's one of the beauties about public health, is it's good for the individual, but it's really good for the community.
It's not just what he said about vaccines that raised some concerns. On Saturday, Mr. Kennedy said online that the Trump White House will, quote, advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water on day one. He called it an industrial waste. He associated it with IQ loss and neurodevelopmental disorders. Is there any evidence of that? And what would be the impact of removing fluoride from our water?
Yeah, not every system in America uses fluoridated water, but the data show that the use of fluoride in water systems has reduced cavities in children by 25%. The use of fluoride in water systems has been rated as one of the most important public health interventions in the 20th century. It's really important that parents are able to ask questions of trusted medical sources to get the information they need to make decisions. And when you hear people who don't have a science background or medical background putting out false, misleading information, it reduces people's trust in the systems.
Okay, all he said was putting out false and misleading information, but he never answered her question about what RFK Jr. said about the putting of fluoride in the water and the results that would come from that. He never answered whether or not that was true or not, if there were any studies. He totally ignored that and went straight to the reason why the fluoridization of the water was supposedly done, which was to encourage teeth health, because apparently kids were having more health problems with their teeth starting around the early 20th century. Well, was there anything going on at the time that might have facilitated this increase in tooth decay other than the fact that there was not a poison added to our water? Could it be the fact that in 1900 we were consuming far, far, far less sugar than we are now? We consume as much sugar in a week compared to what we did in a year back then. So when you're eating things that cause teeth to decay and rot like sugar is known to do, then you're going to have a spike in tooth decay problems. Yet, I've been on a carnivore diet now for close to 4 years. One of the things that's been very interesting to note is that I used to fairly regularly get fillings. Now, granted, I wasn't always the best brusher out there, but I still didn't change that habit after I started eating meat only. The only thing I did a little different is I started flossing more because I had to get the meat out from between my teeth, but I still didn't brush nearly as much. And not one tooth has gotten any cavities in it since then. I usually can expect to get a cavity about once every couple of years. Here it's been nearly 4 years. I haven't gotten a single cavity. I don't even feel that film that I used to feel over my teeth all the time when I would go throughout the day eating a normal standard American diet with all the sugar that includes. And I would wonder, why does it feel that way? I guess I just didn't brush my teeth. I didn't realize that it was directly because of the sugar and the stuff that was coating to it and the way that it sticks to your teeth and the way that it gets in there and starts causing the bacteria to eat that sugar and start eating through your teeth. When I was doing it on a carnivore diet, though, I wasn't having any of that because I wasn't eating the things that promoted tooth decay. I could eat meat all day long and it doesn't promote tooth decay. You do got to watch out for your gums, and I find that that's important to keep that meat out of there. And I still think there is value in brushing your teeth. As a matter of fact, I think there's more value now than I did before, now that I've come to appreciate it. But I also know that there's a lot of things you brush your teeth with that are loaded with chemicals that you just don't need. I stopped buying toothpaste that had fluoride a long time ago. Then I stopped buying toothpaste altogether because I read all the other ingredients on there and said, I don't need all of this stuff. I just need something that's going to get my teeth clean. And since then, I've been using a powder by Redmond called Earth Powder that has bentonite clay. It can have activated charcoal. It's got xylitol, which is great for killing strep mutans, which also cause tooth decay. So it's a very natural product, something that has only natural ingredients in it that I can use to actually get my teeth clean without having all the extra stuff in there that's designed to make it last longer or to fill whatever checkbox some guy like this one has that wants to make sure that we're getting all the things that he thinks we need to have, even though there is so little evidence that points to all the things they have built. All of this information that they've built up on is just full of so many misleading truths, because the companies, the researchers who do all of these studies, and we can go down the list and start looking back at them, some of them through time, go all the way back to Ancel Keys and see how they were influenced by the companies that make the cereals and make the sugars and make the seed oils to promote research that would encourage the sale of their product. And because it sounded good or because he thought it was profitable enough, whichever the case is, people like Ancel Keys took it and ran with it and used it as their banner for getting everybody healthy, and it actually did the exact opposite. Because when you look at the timeline of waistlines and overall metabolic health and chronic illness, starting around the 1960s, it starts to go up just a little bit, but then by the 1980s, it's just shooting up like crazy. And if we're all being so health conscious after the wonderful work that Ancel Keys did, why is it all getting worse? We've even put out smoking for the most part. There's not nearly as much smoking going on as there was back when I was growing up. Heck, when I was a kid, I could buy cigarettes out of a vending machine, so I didn't have to show ID even back then. And we were healthier then than we are now, even with those changes. So there's got to be something deeper than the cigarettes and the other things, and it comes down to what's being put in the food and what's being done in the drugs.
My recommendation to people is, talk to your doctor, get your questions answered. Fluoride is quite safe, but it is important as a pediatrician to know what my patients are consuming, because you can get fluoride in a number of different things. It's in toothpastes, it's in some foods. And you want to make sure that your child is getting enough fluoride, but not too much fluoride. The amount that's put into the water supply is very small, but it is enough to protect your child or reduce your child's chances of getting cavities.
Dr. Besser, I want to pull back just a second when we're talking about our public health system and remind folks that HHS, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, oversees 13 different agencies, including the National Institutes of Health, the FDA, the CDC, which you used to run. Mr. Kennedy talked.
That whole list, let me just scroll back for a second and take a closer look at that list. NIH, FDA, CDC, Indian Health Service, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, Health Resources and Services Administration, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, Advanced Research Projects, Agency for Health, Administration for Children's and Families, and Administrations for Community Living. And I have some dealings with a number of these organizations, and in no case do I give them high marks for veracity and leading us down the right path. They're very susceptible to political movements and following ideological principles and ignoring the science that they claim to be the experts of. So my attitude towards programs like this that are involved in our government, most of them aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the vast majority of them are actually doing the opposite of what they're intending to be doing. My personal opinion says get rid of all of them. Just get rid of all of this stuff, because none of it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, sure, we need to have something in place for mental health situations. Sure, we need to have something for toxic substances and disease registry. But I doubt that these organizations that we're seeing on this screen right now are doing anything to actually make the situation better. They're just creating more bureaucracy. They're following rules that take us to a predetermined destination that has nothing to do with making you healthier. And I'm afraid that they're just being manipulated by the powers that be, what we might call the elites, what I often refer to as those in the World Economic Forum who are all vying for power to be the masters of their own universes. And the only reason I can think of that they haven't been more successful in pushing their plans on us at this point is because they infight with each other just enough to keep them from being unified to take over completely. Well, that's just my opinion on that, but let's press on.
To run. Mr. Kennedy talks a lot about cleaning up corruption at the agencies, including making this suggestion recently.
In some categories of workers, there are entire departments, like the nutrition departments at FDA, that have to go, that are not doing their job. They're not protecting our kids.
Dr. Besser, what's your view on that kind of proposal? I mean, can it be done, and what would be the impact of eliminating an entire department like that?
Yeah, you know, I worked in government service for 13 years. And I have to say, I've never worked in a setting with more committed and talented people than working in our public health system. I think it's always good to ask questions, can things be done better? And that involves bringing in experts, people who know the science, know what can be done to ensure that our systems are working well. You know, one of the things about public health is that when it's working really well, it's invisible. People don't see it. But public health is public health is responsible for you being able to go to a restaurant and knowing that the food is safe, or drinking your water from your tap, or breathing your air. These are things that public health is responsible for. And if we were to come in and wholesale remove departments of public health and areas in public health, you know, everyone in our country would be at risk. You wouldn't know for sure that the food you were getting was safe. You wouldn't know that the children.
Okay. You don't know for sure now. That's my opinion. I know when I pull up to a restaurant and I see a sign that says they got a 100 from the health department, I know that doesn't mean the food is clean or safe or anything. It could mean a number of things, all the way up to a bribe was done. But it could be just as simple as they got a heads up that somebody was coming. They got everything cleaned up just that day. They got lucky they were able to hide some things while the guy was in one part of the building as opposed to the other. So I know all the subterfuge that can go on when companies are trying to avoid the health inspector, or how they can get around what the health inspector finds. I don't find that gives us any security. As a matter of fact, that's the opposite of security. When you pull up to something and a certified document says this is good and it's actually not, and you get to where that's the repeat thing that you experience. I mean, how many Taco Bells have you pulled up to that's had 100 grade on there, and then later that day you're not feeling too good? It might have been because of the food you were eating, but it might have also been because their rating wasn't deserving of what they got. That happens enough to where people still trust this stuff, even though over and over they're finding out that I'm getting sick when I go out to eat. And really, it's hard for people to associate what's causing them to get sick, because almost everything everybody is eating is causing them to be sick to one degree or another. And that is where the big problem is. And that's what people like this are completely missing, is that they have got to change the viewpoint. It's got to change from being medicine driven to focusing on the root cause. They want to focus on medicine because that's where the money is. Root cause is going to solve problems, but once the problem's solved, there's no more money coming out of it. So they're not looking in the right places to actually solve the problems. They claim they're trying to solve the problems. They put on a lot of virtue signaling that they're trying to solve the problems. But look at where we are. He said when people have faith in the public health system, then it's kind of invisible. Does it feel invisible to you? Does it feel like you have faith in it enough to where you can go get the answers you need from your doctor right now? I'd love to hear your comments on that in the chat. What has your experience been, especially here in the United States? But I want to hear from you people from around the world. What's it like in Great Britain? I know you guys have some kind of single payer system over there. What's it like in Australia? What's it like in Germany? Describe some of your experiences, those of you who are watching me from around the globe. I want to know what some of your experiences are like too. One thing I think we've all been kind of convinced of is that we live in this Star Trek age of healthcare, and we are not at that level of healthcare. We're playing with technologies like genetics that we don't even really understand. but we still haven't even figured out nutrition, for goodness sake. And that's where we need to be focusing our attention on, because a lot of the stuff that they're focusing their attention on, they don't even know what they're looking at, but they're running with it like it's the most important thing in the world. And that's because they want to be the first one to break the information that they've cracked this or they've cracked that. Like when they discovered the oncogene. Oh, we have discovered the cure for cancer. And here we are. Let's see, that was the 1960s. So it's been almost 60 years since that happened. And we still have cancer. Has cancer gone down any? I believe it is the second leading killer currently. The first leading killer still being heart attack, and the third leading killer still being accidents. At least that's some research I did recently. I don't know if that's the exact numbers right now. But if cancer is still that high up on the scale 60 years after we discovered the gene that's supposed to eliminate it, we're missing something. And anybody who has watched this show long enough knows that we had research long before the oncogene was discovered that told us exactly what fed cancer, how cancer thrives. And it all depends on glucose production, glucose consumption, because those cancer cells voraciously eat glucose that allows them to grow and spread, and you get more and more cancer as a result of it. So instead of focusing on cutting off the food supply for the cancer, we focused on something that we barely understood, that it had something to do with cancer. Now, I'm sure there's a genetic role in just about everything that we experience, but there's a much larger role in what we put in our bodies that makes the difference in how all this is going to run. And the evidence should be obvious. If you just look at a picture of any beach from the 1950s with people on it, and then pick any beach from the 2020s with a group of people on it. Now, granted, sometimes you're going to pick spring break when all the teenagers are out and this food hasn't destroyed their bodies yet. But if you're looking at your typical beach where the family is all gathering together, the folks are a lot less metabolically healthy today than they were in the 1950s. What's the difference? They were supposedly eating lard and bacon fat, and well, lard is bacon fat, but tallow, and using all kind of things in their food that we've been told since then to avoid, that we got to replace them with these seed oils and with margarine, and that sugar is okay, and eat lots of wheat. Yet everybody's far more unhealthy. We've got a rise in chronic illnesses that we never had these certain illnesses in the past. The only time somebody had fatty liver disease was when it was dealing with an alcoholic. Now there's a new term called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that is so prevalent that it used to be non-existent, and now it's the number one version of fatty liver disease. So it's not even alcoholics that are getting it predominantly. Well, that's caused by eating too much fructose. Fructose is in everything these days, and nobody is paying attention to that. That's just one of many ingredients that are in this food that are tearing your body up, that are making your gut permeated like mine was and giving leaky gut, causing toxins to get into my system that were causing me so much more trouble than I ever would have thought were possible. And it leading to things like high blood pressure and increased stress and increased anxiety and increased depression and brain fog. And it was leading to things like not having the strength to get up and do the things I need to do. But ever since I've gone on a carnivore way of eating and cut all that stuff out of my life, those things are a thing of the past. I still have stress, and I can still let that become anxiety, but it's not like it was before, where it felt like it was just external, like I couldn't do anything about it, or like it was coming up from inside of me. It wasn't just the pressure on the outside, it was the pressure on the inside. And I couldn't understand it, but a lot of that related to the pain I was in from all the inflammation my body was in from the foods I was eating. I know I went on for a long time, but I really get frustrated with these experts who come on and say these things, and they're just protecting the system that they're a part of. They're just protecting their paycheck, essentially. They think their virtue signaling will be for nothing if they back down now and admit the truth. So they're not going to. They're going to double down on that virtue signaling, make it look like they are your health advocate, and that what's going on that's actually helping things is they're the bad guys. But they're only the bad guys because what they're doing looks like it's going to cost these food and drug companies and a lot of these people in politics a lot of money. And that's what I'm hoping to see.
your child's classroom were vaccinated, you wouldn't know that whether or not you had breast cancer, because you might not have access to free screening that public health provides. When people call out government servants in this way, I think it does a real disservice to everyday Americans who benefit so much from these systems.
It's also worth pointing out, Mr. Kennedy's background is not in medicine or in science or in public health. It's in environmental law. He's reportedly said that.
Here we go again with the notion that you got to be an expert in the field or you can't talk about it. How about just using some common sense? Because a lot of these experts aren't using any common sense. And this is the one argument that just makes me so angry when I see people comment. I'll get comments to me like, who are you to tell anybody about health? You don't have a degree in healthcare or anything like that. Look, I never claimed I did. All I did was tell you that I turned my health around, and in 4 years, it has gotten nothing but better for me overall with my health compared to what I was doing before, where at 48, I felt like I was ready to die, but here at age 52, I feel like I'm starting over again fresh because I got my health back. And if my experience were an isolated experience, then I would just be like, I don't know, I guess I found some fluke, guys. But I'm not the only one out here. I've interviewed at least 30 different people on this channel that have talked about their experiences, and I've spoken to hundreds of people through the messages they've sent me, the emails, the comments that they make on the videos that have had similar experiences. So at some point, these hundreds and thousands of people that are coming on board with a carnivore way of eating and finding life-changing results that are easy to maintain because they found a way of eating that doesn't make them miserable. Granted, it is difficult to go on a way of eating that goes against the grain of society. It really rejects the notion of all the ideas of going out to eat at a restaurant, because most of what going out to eat is about is the experience. It's about something emotional. It's not necessarily about the food. And the restaurants know that. They're going to be playing on your emotions as much as they can when they hit you up for that appetizer and when they follow up with dessert and when they push the wine on you. They want to make sure that you're getting top dollar on all of their stuff. They're not worried about your health, and that's not their job. So, I mean, it's understandable. Just know if you're going to a place like that, you're doing some emotional buying, but it's going to make it difficult on a carnivore way of eating because maybe you're sitting with your family and they're all eating this stuff that they serve at the restaurant, and you're sitting there with a hamburger patty or just a steak patty, or maybe you're not eating anything because you decided to eat before you went out so that you could enjoy time with everybody. But there's still sometimes this tension there, like, well, you're not eating, I feel a little bit strange, I'm eating in front of you. Or if you're at a party where the family members that you're with made something that they worked hard on and they want you to try it, but it's not something you eat, so it causes some friction there. But that's stuff that you can get over, and hopefully you're going to be able to get through to the people that are seeing that simply by living the example, not pushing what you were doing on them, but by letting them know that what you're doing is important for your health and that you're not trying to force anything on them. But if they have questions, they can certainly ask and see why I'm doing this. And if they're interested, maybe they can change their health too.
President-elect Trump promised him control of public health agencies, and Mr. Trump himself recently said that he would let Kennedy, quote unquote, go wild on this issue. Big picture, what worries you about this kind of scenario?
Well, a lot of the things that are being discussed really are not at federal control. They're at the state level. Your state determines the requirements for vaccination for school. The state is responsible for whether or not there's fluoride in a water system. In many places, it's a locality that decides that. The state oversees a lot of these functions. But what worries me is that someone...
Before he gets into what worries him, the thing that he said about being under state control means that the federal government can't do anything about it. Well, that's not exactly true. The federal government has a lot of sway over what the states can do. This is an unfortunate part of the result of stuff that was enacted all the way back in the late 19 teens that involves the 16th and 17th Amendment, where we basically took the entire government off the federalist system when we told the states they don't have a place in the national scene anymore. When we had the specifically the 17th Amendment, let the senators be elected at large by the people, and the state politicians, the state House representatives, were already being elected by the people. It used to be the state legislatures selected the senators, and that was how the state legislators maintained a place at the table to where they had a little bit more bargaining power. Well, unfortunately, since that amendment passed, our state legislatures don't have near as much power as they used to have, and that's one of the reasons why so much power has funneled into Washington. I wanted to say Hollywood, but it's funneled into Washington because they don't have that power anymore. The legislature really doesn't matter. The state legislature really doesn't matter to the federal legislature. So once we got broken off from that, it did create that issue. But you can use your federal authority to get the states to come on board. I'm not excited about this mode of doing things, but it is the system that we're stuck with currently. Go back to when Ronald Reagan, who was one of my favorite presidents, if not my favorite president of all time, at least during my lifetime he was. The one thing I didn't like about what he did is he used the state highway system to push the drinking age to be 21 years old instead of 18 years old. And my argument with that is if you're able to carry a gun for your country, you should be able to have a beer afterward. But that's just my own personal opinion about that. But that's an example. It was state controlled. The states could decide who was going to be, what the drinking age was going to be if they were going to employ one at all. Well, they wanted it to be uniform across the country, and they used state highway funding to say, well, if you're not going to join us in this, then you're not going to get the funding for the highways you need. So there are ways around that. I just want to point that out because he makes it sound like there's nothing they can do, and that's absolutely not true.
Of these functions. But what worries me is that someone who has a big microphone, being able to spread misinformation and increase levels of distrust in our public health system. You know, one of the pieces of unfinished business from the current administration is really the restoration of trust in our public health system. This is something that had always gotten bipartisan support. You know, the years I spent at CDC and the years I spent running emergency preparedness and response, we got support from Republicans, Democrats, across the board. It was something that was seen as for the good of our country. We have to get back to a period where the politics is taken out of it. And so I want to give this administration a chance to see how they come out and do this work. It's one thing when you're on the outside, and lifting up criticism. It's another thing when you have that responsibility for ensuring that people and communities are safe and can lead their healthiest lives.
That is Dr. Richard Besser, President and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Besser, thank you. Good to see you.
All right. So what you said there about the getting politics out of medicine and about how the senators and the politicians would typically just go along with whatever they said. That's because they're just like us. They wanted to trust the doctors too. We all wanted to trust the doctors. Trump wanted to trust the doctors during the 2020 pandemic. And you can see where that got us. At least from my opinion, that's where a lot of the disaster came in. This thing would have been over a long time ago and been far less disastrous if it hadn't been handled the way it was, because people were trusting the medical system. And the medical system has been politicized and bought out by the pharmaceutical manufacturers and by interests like Bill Gates and other members of the World Economic Forum that are using healthcare as a means of control. This has always been the argument for public health care, is that when the government has to make the rules for health care, they have the rules, the control over your body to tell you what to do, to tell you what you can and can't eat, to tell you what you can and can't have, or to tell you maybe what surgery you're not allowed to get because of choices you made. But that isn't going to solve any of the problems. What is going to solve the problems is some of the things that RFK is talking about doing, like getting rid of these drug company ads from being on television. I am all for the free market, but the problem is if you're going to keep showing these drug company ads when really this should be handled by doctors who are talking about it and not advertising, then it would make a whole lot more sense. I mean, if I can't see Camel Joe commercials on there because they're unsafe, then I shouldn't see these medicines on there that have a line of side effects at the end of the commercial that's longer than the whole commercial to explain all the problems that you might get from taking this. If I can't see a commercial for something that has a health safety warning, then I shouldn't have to see commercials for this that's encouraging me to take this thing that has actually got more possible repercussions than it does have solutions. But he's moving us in the right direction right now. I would really like to see how it's all going to come together, but the focus on rooting out corruption in all of these organizations is going to be very painful for people like the guy we just saw on there that want to maintain the status quo. The status quo has got to go when it comes to healthcare. If we actually want to get back to a notion of being and living healthy and not living dependent upon doctors and hospitals all the time, we have got to start over from scratch and change the way we are doing this completely. Get to root causes, get away from putting band-aids on medicine, on problems with medications that don't actually solve anything, and actually just create a cycling effect of more and more money coming in because they just keep tinkering with the medicine a little bit just so they can change the patent and keep the money flowing in. It's disastrous, and it's sad. And it's sad because people are getting sick and they're dying and they're trusting in somebody to take care of them, and they're not getting a fair shake. And that bothers me. But I'm hopeful today. I'm hopeful today because Make America Healthy Again is a part of Trump's program, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. seems to be, to me, the man of integrity and the grit to get in there and do what needs to be done. Together with Elon Musk, what they can do to eliminate inefficiency in this whole government mess, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the future is going to bring, and I am not going to let any of the naysayers that are trying to hold on to the status quo change my opinion of that. Well, that's all I got for this one, guys. I appreciate you sticking around. I hope you'll take a look at this quick ad from one of my affiliates, as it does help pay the bills, and I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
The Carnivore Bar, compared to movie theater snack prices, it's no competition. With a tub of popcorn running you over $14, I'd much rather enjoy the salty, crunchy, meaty goodness of a Carnivore Bar any day, and I don't have to cheat to enjoy my night out. Carnivore Bar. Save 10 to 20% when you use my link in the description of this video.